LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Do you have an event or occasion coming up that could use a special touch? Perhaps a wedding, a production, a show? Good! Then you're in luck. Hayley Moores is who you're looking for. Hayley is a makeup artist in the Toronto, Ontario area, specializing in bridal, glam, natural, and special effects. She's incredibly talented, professional, easy to work with, and has a personality that is second to none. To book Hayley Moores today, follow her on Instagram at mad_milash, that's MAD_MILASH, or email her at madmilash, again, that's MADMILASH @gmail.com. Book Hayley Moores today, you'll be glad you did. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Do you find yourself reminiscing on what life was like when you were younger? Do your favorite songs, movies, and TV shows instantly take you back to a simpler time? Great! Then you're in the right place. Join me, Leigh Dickey, on my new web series and podcast, Yo Nostalgia, where I cover everything you grew up with. From films and toys to fads and trends, Yo Nostalgia has it all. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are available. Follow along on social media at Yo Nostalgia Show to keep up on this time-traveling trip. Yo Nostalgia, breathing new life into your memories, available everywhere now. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. Do you enjoy good conversation? Are you a person with many passions? Perfect. Then the Beats and Speaks podcast is for you. Join me, Leigh Dickey, every Friday for stories and interviews about everyday life with everyday people about everyday things. Everyone has a story, and I just want to help them tell it. The Beats and Speaks podcast, your everyday life, everyday stories, everyday people, comedy and entertainment audio joyride. Subscribe and download on LEIGHTDICKEY.com, Leigh Dickey TV on YouTube, and your favorite podcast app. The Beats and Speaks podcast, available everywhere now. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. LEIGHTDICKEY.com. What's going on, everybody? Leigh Dickey here. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Today, this week, I come to you from my outdoor office. Wonderful to be outside. And this week's topic is the fact that I constantly check my email. And I almost feel like I have to constantly check my email for various reasons because my inbox just fills up. But we'll get into why I constantly check my email right after I tell you where you can find the Beats and Speaks podcast. Of course, brand new episodes of the Beats and Speaks podcast with me, yours truly, Leigh Dickey, can be found on your favorite podcast app and player of choice, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever podcasts are available. We're also on my official website, LEIGHTDICKEY.com. You can find us on YouTube as well under Leigh Dickey TV. Of course, all the information and links will be in the description and show notes down below. If you want to get in touch with me or the show, follow along on social media at Leigh T. Dickey on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Send emails, comments, questions and topic requests to LeighTDickey@gmail.com. Now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's get into why I check my email so much right here on a brand new episode right now of the Beats and Speaks podcast. All right, so yes, why I constantly check my email. I constantly check my email just because it's a force of habit, right? I don't like an inbox that's too full. Like if my inbox gets past about 20 emails, I start to panic a little bit. You start hitting that button, and you're like, oh my God, I've waited too long. Somebody's waiting for a response. And even then, I don't want the emails taking up that much room. It's just, if I open up, say, like my iPad or my phone, and I see that my inbox has like any more than 20 emails in it, I'm like, oh my God, I have to like really clean this out and put the emails that come either from like, say, newsletter lists or like, you know, things that I subscribe to in their appropriate folder. And if it comes from, say, somebody in my contact list, then yeah, I got to respond like right then and there. I've got to respond like post haste, and they need their response because I need to take care of that right then and there, right now, right in the moment. I constantly check. If I don't check for a while, it's because I'm just, trying to disconnect and decompress, sort of. But I try not to let my inbox get past like 20 emails in the inbox itself. Because if it's any more than that, then I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to sit here for probably like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes just cleaning it out. And the reason that I do that is just, I don't like things to go unanswered. I like my inbox to be clean, basically. I want it to be as empty as humanly possible and things just filed away in their appropriate folders. I mean, I remember when the internet was first introduced in certain, like, in schools across, like, Canada, because that's where this show comes to you from Toronto, Canada. So in schools, when I was in, like, at the tail, say, like, the 6th grade, they started introducing, like, the internet in schools. It was sort of like, the dinosaur of, like, school internet networks. It was like Windows NT. It was super slow. It would take forever to load. And this is like 20 years ago, in like 2000. I was in the 6th grade. And then, through like grade 7 and 8, they got a bit quicker. And up through high school, we had, say, like, internet in the entire school. But again, it was super slow. The board that I was a part of, where my schools were, they'd give you like an allocated space on a hard drive or something, or like a virtual hard drive, where you had like 200 megabytes to save things, if that, right? If you had to save something a bit larger, you'd have to constantly like overwrite or override the parameters that the board would set in place back in those days. And I remember I took a couple computer science classes in high school, and one of them was, you were constantly checking your email because that's where they would send the assignments. They'd give you physical copies, but the teacher I had would also say, like, back up the assignments through her email and then, like, send them to you. But I remember one day I was in one of the computer science classes. I think I might have been in the 11th grade, so this would have been like 2006, something like that, maybe 2006. It was either I was in the 11th or 12th grade, so 2006, 2007, around there. And I was in class just checking my email because I didn't have, say, a USB key in those days, because spending $20 actually meant something. If somebody gave you $20, you held on to it. And if you, say, got a USB key, at least in my case, I would consider myself lucky, because they were like $20 was $20 back then. It was like considered expensive from, my vantage point and from my family's vantage point. So if they gave you $20, you'd spent it wisely, and you still do that now, ladies and gentlemen. So getting a USB key in those days was like a gig, maybe two if I was lucky, for $20. I needed one. This is before the days when I would still bring my assignments to school. I didn't have a printer in those days, so I'd still bring them to school on, say, a floppy disk in those days. Okay, they weren't like the 5 1/4 inch floppies; they were the smaller ones. But I'd pop it in. I'd have the document there, because my dad had like a stack of blank floppy disks, and I basically just took a few and would use them for my assignments and what have you. And this started like when I was in the 8th grade or what have you, like 7th, 8th grade, because I took a couple computer typing classes or whatnot. And then, when I got up to high school to transport the things back and forth, I didn't have a working printer in those days, so I'd use a floppy disk. Eventually, that, kicked the can. That just didn't work anymore. It just kind of decided that it was going to go on strike permanently. So floppy disks were out the window, and I eventually got a USB key. But before I got the USB key and got on board with current technology, I would constantly send my assignments, my finished assignments, through email and print them off and then hand them in physically to my teachers, right? Because I'm a much faster typer than I am a writer, right? I don't know whether or not like my motor skills being affected by my cerebral palsy has anything to do with that, but that's another story for another time, and I don't want to get into that here on this episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. But I would just constantly send my assignments that were finished back and forth via email. I'd email them to myself and then, download the file, print it off, hand it into my teacher, and just go, there you go, have fun, grade that, thank you. And that was it. And they, a lot of my teachers understood. They actually preferred it that way. Sometimes I would email the assignment to the teacher directly if, things were set up that way. But a lot of the times it was email it to yourself, print it off, and then hand it in. And I did that for probably like the last, say, 2 years of high school for me, just because it was easier, right? Like I didn't, I would constantly get, say, like wrist cramps from writing so much. And when it came to like essays and what have you, I'd have to constantly type them out because I'm not going to give you a 1,500 page written out essay. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to just fill out a report. We're not into like paperwork. I'm not into paperwork and all that stuff. It's just not something I want to do. I mean, I don't envy anybody that has to fill out paperwork, especially in those days before everything kind of went online and all computer based. You still had to do a lot of stuff by hand. You still had to fill out a lot of stuff by hand. But it was one day I was checking my email in this one of the computer science classes I took, and I looked at the inbox, and it had somewhere between like, I think it was 1,063, something like that. It was 1,063 emails that I hadn't checked, whether it was like a Facebook post or whatever. It was just it was an amalgamation of various things, like email lists that I had subscribed to, Facebook when it was still somewhat like less than 2 or 3 years old at that point, because I don't think I joined. I joined when I was still in high school, but like I was probably it was still very new. Not everybody was on it, and there was no such thing as like social media in those days. Like this was like the bottom tier when things were starting to get going. This was probably within a couple years of Zuckerberg like launching the site in those days, like 2 or 3 years within Zuckerberg like kind of launching the site in those days, and good for him. But I just, remember that number. It was 1,063 emails that were in my inbox. I hadn't cleared them or anything. I hadn't checked in a while. And this was, back in the days of, say, like Hotmail. So, like, and my first email address was like, it was very, I don't know, it was just kind of like, it was something simple. I think it was my initials and a number, and then at Hotmail or what have you. It was a very simple, very archaic email address, but that's how people could reach me in those days. And, you can still reach me at my email address, LeighTDickey@gmail.com if you wish, or go through my official website, LeighTDickey.com, and I'll get the email and or comments, questions, and what have you from there. But in those days, it was like very archaic, and I didn't check my email as often as I do now, just because like not all that much important stuff was coming through my email address. It just wasn't happening in those days. I wasn't very on top of things in those days, shall we say. So it was like 1,063 emails. And I remember like my teacher coming by. She was over my right shoulder, and I was just checking my email or, looking for an assignment, going to print it off and what have you. She looks over my right shoulder and just looks at me and goes, "You ever check your email?" I'm like, yeah, I know it's a rather large number, miss. Clearly I don't. I have issues. It's like, I didn't think that they were all that important in those days because not many people would email me anyway. It was very much like MySpace emails, Facebook emails, and just other things. It just wouldn't, I just didn't deem them as important. Like, they weren't emails from teachers. They weren't emails from my family. They weren't emails from myself that were basically assignments or something I had found that I wanted to save for later. So it was a lot of like social networking emails back in those days that I did not just want to, I just didn't feel the need to clear things in those days. But after seeing like 1,063 emails unchecked and your inbox was completely full, And I was just like, yeah, I can't ever. After high school, I got into college and university. Like I was like, yeah, we're never running an email inbox like that ever again. And it was that was at that point where I was like, I have to clear it. I have to clear it. I have to clear it. I have to just constantly. Now, if I look at my iPad or say like my phone and that thing is over 20 emails, I start to hit the panic button a little bit. Sometimes if it's over like 10, I'm like, oh my God, I'm slacking. Where I'm like, okay, I got to clear it. I got to put these in the appropriate folders. I constantly check my email. And it's not because I have the ability to do it. It's just sort of an idiosyncrasy. It's something that I've like taught myself. Like, okay, I have to stay on top of things. I have to clear this inbox because I like a nice, neat, empty, clean inbox. That's just how it is. And if somebody wants to email me, I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. But that's basically why I constantly check my email. It's that one instance in high school where I looked at my inbox and it was at 1,063 unread or unresponded to emails. And I was like, okay, I can't ever have an inbox like that ever again because it's just going to look messy. I'm never going to want to check it. And it's going to go unchecked, and things are going to pile up. I can't ever have that now that I'm older and, kind of in the workforce and just, a professional. I can't ever have an email inbox that looks like 1,063 unread emails. No, I'm never going to check it. And the best way to get a hold of me, even still, is to either send me a text or call me, right? It's just easier for me to respond that way. If you want to send me an email, I'll read it, but I much prefer, of the 3 methods of communication these days, okay, call me, that's number 1. If you want to tell me something and it's of importance, call me. That's number 1. If text is easier, cool, I can read that. It's right there on my phone, which is right in my hip, Email, yeah, I can do that too. I just have to be within shot of Wi-Fi because I don't want to waste my data to read it, and then I'll respond that way. I much prefer calling, but if you're going to use the other 2, I'll respond either way. It might just, take me a bit longer to digest things in that regard. But that's why I constantly check my email. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode because this wraps up another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Find us on your favorite podcast app and player of choice. All the links are in the description down below and in the show notes. Find us on YouTube as well under LEIGHTDICKEY TV, so please do comment, like, share, and subscribe. Rate us 5 stars and leave us reviews too, if you would, on your favorite podcast app and player of choice. We're on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever your podcasts are available. So please and thanks, rate us, comment, send requests for episodes, or just tell me how you're doing. Follow along on social media as well at LEIGHTDICKEY. Send emails, comments, questions, and everything else to LEIGHTDICKEY@gmail.com. Stay in touch, stay healthy, stay yourselves, be happy, and we will see you all next week for a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. We're available everywhere. Find us on your favorite podcast app and player of choice. All information is down in the description. Go to my official website, LEIGHTDICKEY.com. For more info, email me, LEIGHTDICKEY@gmail.com, with your comments, questions, and everything else. Thank you all again for listening. We will see you all next Friday for a brand new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Again, this has been the Beats and Speaks podcast. I've been Leigh Dickey, and I am signing off. We'll see you later. See you next week. Peace. LEIGHTDICKEY.com